Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am TJ Whitehead, Power is Taken, Not Given, and today I'll be interviewing a great content creator, Deconstrussy, who asks us to consider the following question: why settle for being in a cult when you can quite simply start your own? Deconstrussy, how are you doing today, my friend?
I am doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. With bringing guests on, I like to do something where I will present the audience with a little bit of their work so they kind of know who we're talking with here. And I also want to acknowledge that you have a fan here, Hugh Jass, who watches our content quite a lot. Praise Klombadrov. He delivered us from Gleep, and his mercy knows no bounds. So look, you got a convert joining us already. This is great news.
Love that.
So I wanted to pull up this clip so those who aren't familiar with you kind of know a little bit about you. Let's go.
When I was a Christian and I found out that not every other Christian believed that the story of Noah's Ark was to be taken literally, that really opened my eyes on how inconsistent the largest religion in the world was. I grew up being taught that that actually happened, that two of every animal somehow fit on one boat and didn't eat each other for the entire time. And of course, my only justification and logic for believing in that impossibility was that God can do anything. But to find out that a significant amount of Christians viewed that story as a metaphor for what I couldn't tell you was both shocking and relieving to me. I could actually start to question the validity of it. And ultimately, it led me to become one of the Christians that believed that it was just a metaphor, something to do with trust God always, I guess. And then I find out that the story of Adam and Eve is also another one that not everyone takes literally. That one blew my mind. And there's a few different ways that people interpret that story. I think the most common one being it being something to do with intimacy, eating the forbidden fruit being doing it, something like that. But it keeps getting better. Apparently, not every Christian believes that people like Methuselah lived to be 900 something years old, or that the universe was created in 6 literal days. Because apparently time didn't work the same back then or something, or the translations just say days and say years, but they don't actually mean it. I don't know. But all those inconsistencies when it came to just what Christians believe really took a toll on me believing it. Nobody agrees, but everyone believes that they're the correct one. And as always, when it comes to the parts that they want to cherry pick, they take those parts of the Bible literally. But anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. Did you take all those things literally when you were a Christian?
Ooh, that bump was loud there. All right. I wasn't expecting that. Look, that was great. I want to get into a little bit of your background and everything there. But before we do, we can talk about what you mentioned in that video with the literal interpretation of the Bible. And I grew up the same way. We'll get into your past and exactly what denomination you followed and what doctrines you practiced and everything. But the literal interpretation of the Bible was always a big deal for, we were independent fundamental Baptists. And it was a big deal unless it wasn't, because there are some times like, well, no, that has to be a metaphor, unlike these other ones, these other fantastical stories that have to be real. And that was always a fun one to me. And I brought up the flood video did, because that was one of them that really seemed weird. I remember asking people who would come, like evangelists come and visit, I said, yeah, the flood thing, that one doesn't seem like it could happen or whatever, right? God, here's some way to explain that. What was your first interaction with, the implausibility of a lot of the biblical stuff?
So, when it comes to the flood specifically, I didn't question it a lot until I got much older. I think probably high school, end of high
Yeah.
school. Because it's just one of those things where you brush it off as God can do anything, whatever. Like, don't question that, because why would you? It's clearly one of his miracles. Just trust it. But I guess beyond that, it's kind of like you start noticing that a lot of Christians are only taking certain things out of the Bible and applying them to their everyday life. And so for me, I guess it was really just about finding like what that limit was. Like, why are certain people, what am I trying to say here? Why are certain people trying to use these aspects of the Bible and saying these are true, but then they're not saying these other things are true? And that led me to really question everything.
Yeah, it's true. It's around high school. Yeah, high school or so is when it really starts to to click for you. So this stuff isn't adding up. And then I don't know about you, but I grew up, we would debate and argue about the Bible all the time. So like the more you did it, the more you started to question your own answers here. It's like, wow, we just accept this and see where it goes. But I don't know. But okay, let's get into a little bit about you, my friend. I've been meaning to try to talk to you on a live or a YouTube video or something for a very long time now. I don't even know when I started following you, but it was quite a while ago. And I see Garby the cat says, Columbia be with you. Great guests, love their stuff. Fire, fantastic. I can't wait to get to the Columbia Drive stuff. Like how you came up with that, I don't know, but I love it. And I'm always shocked to hear something like this, but with a content creator as prolific as you are, that sometimes I'll run across it in these videos where people say this is their first time doing like a YouTube interview. Is that correct?
So this is probably I think this is my third one.
Okay, third. Okay, so pretty new to it and everything. And you mentioned your camera quality, because when I started doing this about, man, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago is when I started doing YouTube interviews and stuff like that. And I could actually, no, it goes all the way back to TikTok, actually. I started doing TikTok maybe 3.5 years ago. And I can't believe how obsessive I've become with angles and lighting and audio quality, just stuff that I watch my old content and I can't believe anybody watched it. It is horrible. It is horrendous. It is just, I have no understanding of what I'm doing. I mean, what I said was great, top notch shit. Don't worry. But I'm saying, but the presentation left a lot to be desired. And now I obsess over it. Like the background and stuff I have here, like meticulous. It took like 8 months before I'm like, okay, I can relax, because if I'm looking at it and if something's a little bit off, it just really irks me. So it was funny when you mentioned like, I don't like the camera quality. So yep, I do that all the time.
Yeah, I cracked the blinds open just a bit to get a little more light in to see if that would help anything. But
it's funny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is kind of hilarious. But all right, could you let us know a little bit about your background? You know, where you grew up, what your influences were, and how you first got involved in Christianity?
Yeah, so from as young as I can remember, I believed in God. I was just raised in a Christian family. We were specifically Lutheran, Evangelical Lutheran, ELCA. We were actually, I know it's going to sound weird, but we were actually a pretty reasonably liberal church, at least from my understanding, because there were a couple different people that I knew in my church that I found out had come out of the closet. And they were accepting, at least from what I could tell. So that was kind of nice to find out in my later years, even as I was kind of on my way out of going to church. But yeah, I don't really have any trauma stories from my church, surprisingly. Obviously, looking back, there were some things that you think about, like revisiting the lyrics of some of those hymns, talking about the blood of Christ and just like sacrifices, and you're just kind of like, we have kids in the congregation singing these words, not having a clue what they're even singing about. But yeah, I went to a Christian preschool, Sunday school every week, Bible school every summer. I had my confirmation class, went to confirmation camp, baptized, obviously. Junior year and senior year are the only 2 years of school that I was not at a Christian school. But yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned the hymns. I will say there are some trappings and familiarities of being not just culturally a Christian, because most Americans are culturally Christians. You know, like our names, half of them come from the Bible. We practice religious Christian holidays, and we have Christians expressions or expressions from the Bible, like David and Goliath, stuff like that. Like that's pretty much all of us. But someone who grew up actually enmeshed in it and immersed in the teachings and the doctrines and church attendance and all. And there are a few things I miss from it. I do miss a lot of the hymns, because a lot of them fucking slap, man. A lot of hymns are great. I love.
There are some good ones.
There are some really good ones, man. Like, man, get out of here. We talk about Christmas music. Yeah, I mean, I love Christmas music all day long, but the creepiness of a lot of them stands out a lot. And I never noticed it until I was actually pretty young. I used to watch horror movies with my mom all the time. And the reason this happened is because I'm the oldest kid. And when my mom was young, she really liked watching horror films. My dad hates watching movies. Any movie, doesn't matter. My dad watches movies, falls asleep immediately. He's done. He doesn't care at all. And so he's always been that way, I guess. So mom doesn't want to watch the horror movies alone. And so she dragged dad in the room and make him watch him. And then when I was born and I kind of went up the walk and talk, like, okay, all right, I got someone to watch movies with. So, 7-year-old TJ is watching these violent horror films that I probably shouldn't have watched, but I had to do it for mom. And we've kind of bonded over those throughout the years. And I remember watching one movie. It is this B-grade horror film from probably the mid 1990s or early 1990s called Demon Wind. And I remember watching this, and the movie opens up with these close-up images of Jesus and crosses and candles, and you hear a church congregation singing in the background, "Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?" And as I'm watching it, I was like, oh, wow, this song is kind of scary. This song is really creepy. It's like, and then you think of all the songs that focus on blood, like, there is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. Sinners plunge beneath that flood, lose all the guilty stains. It's like, oh, yeah, there's a lot of blood imagery here. It's kind of creepy. That's when I first caught it. It took me like probably 10, 12 more years before it really hit home. But yeah, I'm glad you noticed that because that is kind of weird, right?
Yeah, I attended a relative's wedding a few months ago, and just some of the song choices had me revisit, because like I had kind of clocked it a while ago, but that just like brought it all up again in my head. It was like, wow, blood everywhere at a wedding. Okay.
Like not where you would expect, right? And I didn't know that Lutherans did confirmation too. In fact, I'm not entirely sure what confirmation is for Catholics either. I know it's something they go through when they're teenagers or something like that, or preteens, when I guess they make sure you know what you're talking about with the faith. Like, how does that work?
I think it's kind of that vibe. It was kind of a blur for me, a lot of that time period, because I was going through a lot of bullying in school. So that specific event of going to confirmation camp, most of what I remember is just being read a bunch of Bible stories, sitting around a campfire, and doing a bunch of like activities like zip lining and whatnot. So I would really consider the confirmation camp stuff to be more Vacation Bible School-esque. It's just kind of more of a deep diving. You have to like memorize some verses and stuff. But
that's kind of disappointing. I always assumed there was like a test. It sounds like a test, right? Confirmation?
There was like, I know we had to memorize a bunch of stuff in the catechism.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that at the confirmation camp, we did this thing where it was like the Romans versus the Christians or whatever, where you like, one team is the Romans, the other ones are the followers of Christ, and you have to make sure that you don't let the Romans catch you because they'll put you to death or whatever. that Christian fantasy of being persecuted,
Yeah. Can't have. Wow. That is. Yeah, I didn't know that. Great news actually. We got Robert here saying that Jesus loves you all. It's not too late. Were you aware of this? Did you know that Jesus actually loved us and it's not too late for us?
I actually had no clue. I've never been told that before in my life.
Not one time, right? This is thank you, Robert. We appreciate that. Yeah,
I'm gonna assume that they're praying for me as well.
Oh,
no one's ever prayed for me.
So. Yeah, I mean, I never hear that. I can't tell you the last time anyone's mentioned that they would pray for me. It's I do like using that in reverse though. Whenever I criticize religion in general or Christianity in specific, and someone will say, "This is wrong. How dare you question the power of God? God can do anything. You shouldn't be saying this." I like to respond with, "Well, you should pray for me to stop." If that's the case, keep doing that, and we'll see how long it takes for God to actually put the brakes on this. Yep. And with the what's it called? The literal interpretation of the Bible you're talking about there. I didn't expect you to say that it wasn't quite as draconian as a lot of people saw with religion, like the rules and stuff. And we'll get into that. But you mentioned in the video with Adam and Eve and how the fruit could be representative or something. Like sex is one thing you mentioned. I think I have heard that. I don't know if I've ever heard a Christian say that, but I've heard people talk about that one. That one seems odd, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah,
no.
I've had Christians in my comments whenever I bring up the story of Adam and Eve and like how snakes can't talk and like just like pointing out like just the silliness of the story. Then I get Christians in my comments saying, well, it's a metaphor. You know, like there wasn't actually a fruit. The fruit was when they first got intimate with each other and they weren't supposed to or something.
Oh, okay.
Like, okay.
That's an odd one and everything. The other one that I like to mention with the literalism and all that is, especially, I can't speak for Christians throughout history or Christians in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, but from the part like Western society that I'm familiar with, you don't hear a lot of Christians talk about the literal nature of Jesus's advice or Jesus's proclamations on how to receive eternal life. In the New Testament, he tells everyone, every fucking one of them, sell all your goods, give them to the poor, and follow me. Like without exception, he says that's how you will enter in the kingdom of heaven. All of a sudden, then, this is just an example of how one rich guy just loved his goods so much that he couldn't follow Jesus. And I say, well, apparently you do too. Apparently you love your goods too much, because it seemed pretty clear to me you don't take that part literally.
Yeah, I think it's very strange how they can't even follow the basic teaching of Jesus of love your neighbor. So how are we going to expect them to give away their goods?
Yeah, not going to happen. All right, so you mentioned that the structure they had for you wasn't as strict as it is for a lot of folks. Like I grew up in a denomination that was, oh, were they political?
When I attended, they weren't. And
Hmm.
I'm going to have faith that the church that I went to is still not very political.
Okay. All right. So what was it then? What was it that started drifting you away from the faith?
You know, it was really just getting older, and I've always been a very logic-based person. So I think that if it hadn't happened when it did, it was still inevitable at some point for me to leave the faith, because I started hardcore questioning when I stopped going to church and when I started going to a non-Christian school. I think that's when the questions really started going in or coming into my head. Ugh. But yeah, I was just getting older and like learning how to actually think critically, realizing that the Bible is making all these claims, but there's not really any outside evidence to back those claims. And eventually it just got harder and harder to convince myself that God existed. I think one thing that also contributed was that I'm gay, and I viewed that as wrong, even though my church specifically wasn't like extremely openly saying like that's a bad thing to be.
Hmm.
I still knew enough Christians that viewed that as a bad thing, including my parents. So I would pray to God to make me straight. And
Mm.
eventually I was just like, okay, he's either okay with me not being straight or he's just not there. Because I was surrounded by all these Christians that were saying that God exists, God's doing all these things in my life. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously God exists because everyone else is saying that he's doing things for them. But for me, I never had that. So I believed, but I was wondering what's going on that he's doing things for them and not me. And eventually it just kind of led, along with the critical thinking, to me realizing that he's probably not actually there and these people are just convincing themselves that he is.
Hmm. Yeah, that's okay. Because I was wondering what the catalyst would have been, because there was always something for that kicks someone off on the quest, and which is why I was thrown off in the beginning, because most people that I talk to that are in our position came from rather strict religious backgrounds. Because I think if you grow up and people are Christians but don't take it all that seriously, you're not likely to do what we did and do deep dives into the creation and the logic and the construction and the proliferation of Christianity. It's like it's just something that's kind of there and part of your life. You don't think too much about it. And I was wondering what that was. A lot of people, it is some sort of trauma. It wasn't necessarily trauma for me. It was like it was taking it very, very seriously. And I know you got to feel this way. That is kind of the part that's the most insulting about doing content or having conversations about religion and religious deconstruction, is that you will have people who will swear up and down that this is the most important aspect of humanity, that there's nothing more vital than this information contained in this book and the religion, that's used as the venue of proclaiming its message, and don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a lot of Christians would probably consider my parents to be lukewarm Christians.
Mm-hmm.
They love that term.
They
Like,
do.
my mother is, like, a very godly woman. Like, she goes to church every Sunday. She believes with all her heart. Like, there's nothing I could do to convince her otherwise, and that's fine. That's her belief. Her faith helped her get through cancer. Awesome. I still view it as a coping mechanism because it really was. But we didn't even pray before meals unless we were out with, like, another Christian family. It felt very performative in that sense. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't really have, like, that intense upbringing that pushed me away from it like a lot of Christians did, and I think I'm kind of unique with that as a deconstruction account because I don't have that trauma necessarily. At least I don't think I have any religious trauma that I can recall. Maybe deep down in there I do, but I don't know.
Huh, yeah, that is fascinating. So, what made you decide to get into? Well, actually, I'll back up a little bit. You mentioned your mom and how she still believes and everything, and you said it was from cancer and everything that during her. Well, I do acknowledge that in a lot of ways. I don't know if you've thought about this a whole lot. Actually, there's no way you haven't, but it seems that there's a lot of people who are, I don't know, like, I don't want to say predisposed. They're predisposed to believe in religion and faith and everything, and that given the right circumstances, there's no way they're ever getting out of it. Like I think of an example with my dad. It's a good example of this. I don't know if you'll see this, but my dad had issues with alcohol years ago, and he was being monitored for it. He was in the army and everything. Got into a car accident, and he started going to AA, which is a quasi-religious organization in and of itself. And while he was there, he met someone who invited him to church. That's when we started going to church back in the 90s. And my dad hasn't had, as far as I know, he hasn't had a drop of alcohol in 30 years. And if I were him, I don't think I would ever break away from belief in God, right? I mean, the proof is right in front of him that my life was like this one day, and I sought after God. I heeded his counsel. I read his word. I felt the power of God, and if not for that, I might not be alive today. I would never fall. I'll never fault him for believing God at all. I'm not going to say, oh, this guy's stupid. I wouldn't say that because my dad anyway. But this guy is stupid, and this guy is unreasonable and everything, because when you have that, I can't replace that personal experience. So I do understand that part, but it's kind of hard to have a conversation that way because I still don't believe it. There's very few polite ways to tell someone, I think the most important thing in your life is nonsense. It is very difficult to do. I mean, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I've tried to talk to my mom, just not even to make her an atheist, but to explain to her why I am. And she pretty much always just kind of shuts down. She's like, oh, I have to do something else. And she'll, like, get off the call or whatever. Not even like me calling her specifically to, like, talk to her about this stuff, but like if it gets brought up, because she actually kind of brings up religion a lot with me. I remember one day she messaged me, I think when it was something about Pope Francis,
Mhm.
which I don't know why, as a Lutheran, she's even worried about the Pope. But she was like, "Did you hear that Pope Francis is okay with gay people?" I'm just like, "Okay, I don't care. What does that have to do with me? I don't believe still, so whatever he's saying doesn't apply to me." But I think she deep down is still holding on hope that I
Yeah.
will come back. But
It,
yeah.
it must be that is when you said that, I had the same thought. It's like, wow, like Martin Luther is rolling over in his grave right now. You
I
think
know.
the reason Protestantism exists is because of this guy, and you're worried about what the Pope thinks? That's kind of weird. We got a comment here, Conservative to the Ozarks. That's such a great insight that usually people who deconstruct and become atheists or lose their faith are typically people who actually take their faith the most seriously. Yeah, and okay, so with your mom, has she, well, over time I've kind of noticed this, and people who didn't take religion seriously or know anything about it. Still kind of the same with that. But there has been an increase in the what's the word I'm looking for? In the intensity of people who were already religious and how seriously they take it now over the last 10, 15 years or so. So like your mom, you said she'd be called a lukewarm Christian. Great. If for those of you who didn't grow up Christian, that probably doesn't mean anything to you, but they do say that a lot. There's a whole Bible verse about it and everything. They always spew you out of Jesus's mouth. Has she taken this faith more seriously, or become more intense, or become more conservative over the years, or along with other Christians, you know?
So, she and I don't talk a ton, but
Mhm.
I don't think that she's really changed too much in her views.
Hmm.
I mean, the cancer thing was back in like 2014, when she first like got the diagnosis, I believe. And I know like 4 or 5 years prior, she had like switched over to every car ride we had to have Joy FM on. If you don't know what that is, it's like a
Joy
Christian
FM.
radio.
Wow.
I always say that if you see a Joy FM bumper sticker, you know you're behind a bad driver. But yeah, I don't think that she's any more intense from what I can tell. But there was definitely some sort of a switch at one point prior to the cancer diagnosis that I thought was interesting, because we used to just listen to like regular radio, just pop music, whatever. And then she eventually switched over to only Christian radio. So I thought that was strange. I don't know what the catalyst for that was.
This is an unplanned tangent here, but when you mentioned Joy FM, I haven't heard that. I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's a name I haven't heard in a long, long time. Like Joy FM is a throwback right there. I don't think people can properly appreciate the cringiness of Christian culture that tries to appropriate modern contemporary culture, and how hilarious and awful it is. Like you will see do you remember when they had t-shirts that would mimic popular companies, but they would change the font to read like something
Yeah.
Christian? I mean, they still do that. I remember like the Ford logo, the Ford slogan used to be, "Have you driven a Ford lately?" But the shirt would have you spoken to the Lord lately?" written in the
Oh my
Ford
God.
logo. Yeah, I remember that one. When Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, I saw a picture of a church that had a billboard in front of it, one of those marquees, and it had what looked like the Red Dead Redemption, the sun in the background, the cowboys walking across the ground, and it said real life redemption through Jesus Christ and everything. I
Oh,
love this stuff
fun.
because it's so horrible. And there's no part of the culture that I find more offensive than the music. Listening to contemporary Christian music should be a war crime. Like the Geneva Convention should have this written down somewhere, that you can't force anyone to subject themselves to this audio torture. I remember as a kid, I would hear people. So when I grew up in my faith, we weren't allowed to listen to, rock music. Any music with a 2/4 beat was evil. That syncopation came from the tribes of Africa, where they worship demons, and so it's bad for you to listen to that. That's kind of what they taught. And the when CCM came out, all the kids and all the young Christians thought they'd try to be cool, and they would try, "Oh, we'll listen to this. We'll seem cool and hip and everything like that." And even back then I said, "No, this stuff is awful. This is terrible. This is the worst music I've ever heard." And the conservative teachers that I had, the clergy members, they would say, "Well, you guys know that these CCM artists, they're not even actual Christian artists. They are just artists who couldn't make it in the actual secular music game."
No, I've heard
And
that.
it's true. Yeah, it's true. And you can tell by listening to the music, it's fucking garbage. It's dog shit. It is horrible. So yeah, sorry that you had to go through that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have like I don't remember any specific names, but I think I have seen like some people who started off in the Christian contemporary music, and then once they finally like made a name for themselves, they can get out of it
Yeah,
and start doing other things.
of course. Yeah. Who wants to be there? It's like Christian, or not Christian, but conservative comedians. Conservative comedians, no one grows up dreaming of being a right-wing comedian. Like you want to be a regular comedian, you don't make it, and then you start doing the conservative circuits, and they will laugh at anything. One of my favorite things to do is play clips of conservative comedy and watching the stuff they laugh at, because it's just clapter. It's not really telling jokes at all. It's just saying stuff that will get applause lines. But I don't know. That's pretty bad here. So
we sure own the libs, right?
no, really, yes. That's really all it is. There was, what is a woman? Ha, they don't know what a woman is. Crowd just starts clapping and everything. So that's not funny. That's not a joke at all. I like to say that I think Donald Trump is the only funny conservative comedian. That I always say, like, Donald Trump does make me laugh with a lot of shit that he says. Like, he's a terrible human being, a scourge in society. I wish nothing but the worst for him. But he does have great comedic chops. When it comes to like reading a crowd and finding out a quick phrase that he'll catch on to, I think he's pretty good at it. And you talked about your mom. When you came out as actually before I asked about this, what was the moment where you realized that you were an atheist? That's always fun for me, people, like when it finally dawns on them.
So I think I kind of came to the full realization that I wasn't convinced anymore when I was in college, about like 19 years old. I always generically just say, yeah, I was a Christian for about 20 years, which, I mean, that includes 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, but whatever. We'll just go with whatever.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
In college.
Well, I mean, go ahead.
There wasn't like a specific thing that made me even think about it. I think I know that when I would go out of my way to argue with atheists at one point online. Like once I had like actual access to the internet, because growing up we had that dial-up connection. We had like 1 hour of internet service for my mom wouldn't let me be on any longer. But once I actually had like internet access is when I started arguing with Christians or arguing with atheists, and trying to, because I knew I was kind of losing my faith and I wanted to prove them wrong to rebuild my faith up. And I think that's what a lot of Christians do, especially like in my comment sections. I can kind of like tell. And I've had Christians come to me in my messages and be like, hey, I actually think that what you said clicked with me. I ended up becoming an atheist. And that's not the goal. That's never the goal, is to like get Christians to become atheists. The goal is to have people listen to an atheist perspective. And if it resonates with you, it resonates with you. But yeah, I would argue with Christians and it kind of backfired. And it made me doubt even more. And then I started watching atheist YouTube content. People like Jacqueline Glenn. I don't know if you know who that is.
No, not familiar.
She is a pastor's daughter. And I watched her atheist content starting in like 2015, 2016, really hardcore. And I also watched Mr. Atheist. I don't know if you know who that is.
No, I don't either of these. Wow. This is
Jimmy Snow is his name. But yeah, he goes by Mr. Atheist as well. I actually have him on my friends list on my Switch.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, I watched atheist creators and that kind of solidified it to me. I think as far as my mom finding out that I'm an atheist, it wasn't anything direct. I didn't like come to her and say, hey, I'm an atheist. It was just probably like a meme I shared on Facebook or something. Probably gave her the hint that I was an atheist. But I never directly came out to her. It's just something she kind of caught on to.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, that's right. You said you guys don't talk a whole bunch, if I remember. Yeah. So
I was in college and then she ended up moving away after the college era. So
yeah, that's always an interesting one to me, about how people tell was there anyone in your life who was a dedicated Christian who you were worried about them finding out?
Honestly, my mom was really the only person that I was that close with. Because like I only have like one like really, 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 really close friend back then. And she wasn't really religious herself, so it was like fine. And my partner, who I've been with since high school, wasn't religious either, so there was really no ties that were cut.
Oh wow, yeah, that's great, because that's one of the trickier parts with people who do deconstruct, that have a lot of their entire social network is nothing but Christians. Like dropping that bomb on people is kind of scary. It was scary for me. I didn't tell my folks for probably 6-7 years. I think I kept that to myself, not because I was afraid of them disowning me or anything like that, which is like a lot of bad case scenarios we'll see with folks, but I just didn't want my folks to lose sleep at night thinking that their son was going to spend eternity in hell. I don't want to put them through that. So that's kind of tough right there. But I like that you mentioned the goal in making this sort of content. And you said that your goal isn't necessarily to deconvert people, but to put the information out there, and you can do with it what you will, for, education, entertainment value. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the most frustrating thing for me to see in my comments is just incorrect information. I'm not here trying to convert you to atheism.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to make sure that you're not believing this stuff that isn't even true. Like, they found Noah's Ark. No, they didn't. Like, these heavily debunked things that people just blindly accept, they just heard it from a Christian and they just go with it because it helps their confirmation bias instead of actually like looking into it for 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's and religion relies so heavily on that. It's one of those situations like, when someone does something and you just have to wonder, like, why is this happening? And this happens a lot when people who are not forced to do so will get involved in a conversation on religion, for example, and they will write with no shame, yes, Noah's Ark has been discovered, it's been proven, they know it's real. And it's like, why? You don't have to do that. You can just check and see if that's correct or not. And then when you call them out on it, no shame. No shame at all. They'll move on to something else. Well, they actually found blood under the hill of Golgotha that had half the chromosomes a human being has. Like, what are you doing here? Why are you wasting your time like this? Like, I have to know how these folks' brains work. Like, whenever they die, I need people to dissect it, like find out what's going on here, because there's an issue.
Yeah, the blood one's one of my favorites that I didn't even know about when I was a Christian. So I found this out as an atheist creator.
Oh, great. Oh, wow.
There are Christians that believe that apparently the blood of Christ was found, and within it had 23 chromosomes from Mary, which they somehow confirmed, and 1 chromosome from God, which means 24 chromosomes, which means that he has the same amount of chromosomes as a snail. I get all sorts of praise sneeze us comments now.
That's
whenever
great.
I respond to that.
Yeah, with no shame and fear about it at all. I started out, so I became an atheist around, I was probably 27, 28 years old. And I had deconstructed from Christianity during college. During college, I was doing a study. I went to a Baptist school, and we had this week called Baptist Heritage Week, in which the entire point of it was to demonstrate that Baptists were the correct, or at least the most correct, denomination of Christianity. And I was really excited about this because I loved arguing with other Christians as well, showing like why we believe what we believe. And at the end of the week, the conclusion that we were presented was Baptists are correct because we follow what the Bible says. And I heard that's like, is everyone just okay with that? That's literally what every Christian denomination would say. I don't think any Christian denomination is like, yeah, we don't give a shit. We just do whatever we want. So
Right.
I started doing my own study I had to start from basics. And I said, okay, I'm going to start with the construction of the New Testament canon. The 27 books of the New Testament, I'm going to find out how I can historically and accurately prove that this is the divine inspired word of God. And my results were not comforting at all. Like, from what I found, that, oh yeah, half of these books are anonymous. The Gospels are anonymous. They weren't canonized until the Council of Hippo a few hundred years after Jesus died. Regular people with no more apostolic authority than you or me said, yeah, this is God's word. The Holy Spirit led me to that conclusion. That's not good enough. There's no way I can defend that. And at that moment in my early 20s, I was no longer a Christian. But I still had the look at the trees argument, well, there's some things here. Why is there something rather than nothing? There must have been some sort of divine artificer, some prime mover to get the ball rolling on this. And I don't believe that this deity, this being answers prayers or has a birthday party set up for me after I die. I don't believe anything like that, but there's got to be something there. And after a while, it took years, literally years, I kind of realized there's no difference between a God that doesn't interact with its creation and a God that doesn't exist. It kind of just popped on me. Like, I just realized that out of nowhere.
And I think that once you get out of the organized religion aspect, like a lot of like ex-Christians do, um, I'm not part of Christianity anymore, but I believe in a deity that
Yep.
lasts for a bit, and then oftentimes it just kind of falls off. Another thing I find interesting, based on what you were mentioning earlier, is the Bible being used as a guidebook for life is just so bizarre to me looking from the outside, because it's really just a series of different books
Hmm.
compiled together, and it has all sorts of rules for like different situations back in that time period, and people are trying to apply that to now, and it's just strange to me that these people are trying to apply that to current days when it's just so outdated. Like, sure, love your neighbor, be kind to one another, those are universal things, though not exclusive to the Bible.
Yeah, it's insanity. It's insane to try to do it, and the hoops that they'll jump through to try to defend this by, I, I mean, what, especially with the parts the Bible, the parts the Bible misses, I think are easy to kind of gloss over because, oh well, why would the Bible mention anything about whether it's morally okay to smoke cigarettes? They didn't have cigarettes back then. Yeah, you got to kind of decipher it your own there. But when the Bible gets something clearly wrong, that's when you really got to say, okay, what's going on? And I'm sure this has happened with you and your experience with the hoops people will jump through to defend biblical slavery. Hilarious. Like, you know what
Oh
I'm talking
god,
about?
if your slave doesn't die within the first couple of days, it's totally fine to beat them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what, can we maybe just have an 11th commandment, or take out one of the don't have other gods, don't have graven images, blah blah blah, like put don't have slaves.
Or how about a very clear, unambiguous age of consent? That would be cool. That would be a
That
good
would be
one.
nice too, yeah.
Yeah. Not there, by the way. For those of you wondering, nowhere in the Bible can you find God saying, "Hey, it's wrong to fuck kids." He doesn't say it. It never
Or
happens.
what about when they defend the age that Mary was, as if she being like between 12 and 16 was okay to be impregnated by a god? Mind you, she wasn't asked if she wanted to do it. Even if she was like older, she wasn't asked. She was told what was going to happen to her, and she said, "May God's will be," or whatever.
Yeah. It's like when you run across that, you just have to ask yourself, okay, is this really what I want to place the foundation of my morality on? And it does get tricky because maybe like you grew up in a different type of Christianity, but I grew up in a type that took everything the Bible said very seriously. I mean, at least we pretended to. And when there was something that was difficult, that, like, for example, God said, "Well, you got to genocide this entire town, like the men, women, children, infants, old people, animals. By the way, they got to go too." It was weird. It's like, well, I'm sure God has some sort of plan for this or whatever. But I got to find some way to square the circle. I understand the predicament because I was there before, where you have to find some way to rationalize something you can't control. But when people don't take it seriously, I actually have a hard time putting myself into that mind frame. Like, I don't get it. I don't get Christians who will say, well, yeah, we believe in God and Jesus and the Bible and all, but we don't necessarily believe everything that's there. We think that it's a collection, like what I believe, basically. Yeah, these are old stories and stuff, but there's no actual like spiritual authority behind these commandments. The way I see it, the Bible is either the word of God or it's not. Right?
Yeah,
It's like
it's kind of confusing because the Bible is literally what you're basing this belief on in the first place. Without that, if you're like discarding that, why have the belief?
what's the point? Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, what's the point? You don't need it at all. And they just try to find some way for it to make sense, and I just don't get it. What's even weirder though is when atheists, or maybe not necessarily atheists or agnostics, but non-believers, or you know what, this applies to both. This applies both to atheist non-believers as well as Christians who still insist that this God and that Jesus are real and everything, but they don't take some part seriously. For example, they'll say, well, when Paul says women should be silent in the church and that women should dress themselves with shamefacedness and sobriety and that wives must, be under the authority of their husbands, that's just Paul. That's just Paul and his weird neurosis and everything. We don't got to listen to that. It's like Paul wrote half the New Testament. Are you telling me
Mhm.
you can just ignore this guy?
Yeah, I've mentioned before that my church had a female pastor, and I would get all sorts of comments like, "Oh, well, that's your problem. You were listening to a woman,
Oh
or
boy.
you were in that fake Christianity." It's like, okay, if you say so.
Yeah, I don't know. What annoys me a lot too is you mentioned that uh, Christians will not understand what the Bible says and that they will point to something that's just false and unprovable. They can just look it up. I hate it when we do that too, though, because it does happen. It does happen every now and again. And an example that always gets me is there's a verse in Exodus that says, "Man shall not sleep with man, it is an abomination unto God." And I've heard a lot of people say, well, actually, that verse is, "Man shall not sleep with boy." This is protecting people from pedophiles. Like, no, it's not. That's not what it is. I mean, it's not necessarily our understanding of homosexuality, but the verse is like it was violating cultural mores for a high status man to be penetrated by a younger status man. Like that's how they viewed
Yeah.
sexuality. So yeah, back in those days. And this is not protecting children from sexual predation because the penalty for this is death for both people. So you don't have to. People try to whitewash the Bible to make it more chill than it actually is. You don't got to do that, folks. There's no need to. You can just actually treat the text for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard the whole like there was a 1946 mistranslation to where it changed it
Mhm.
from man and young boy to man and man. And from my understanding, it is man and man. But the Bible doesn't say anything about like actual like consenting, loving relations, to my understanding,
Mhm.
between a man and a woman and a woman.
Yeah, it's so yeah, and what he's discussing here, folks, is that it's actually hard to consider it from a modern mindset. The example I use is that in those times, like in the ancient, like 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, they didn't really have a concept of homosexuality like we have it now. They like and the example I kind of use is, let's say you go back in time and you talk to, say, Julius Caesar or something, and I go to Julius Caesar and I say, "How you doing, Julius? I'm TJ Whitehead and I'm a heterosexual." And he would say, "A heterosexual? What's that? What does that mean?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a heterosexual and I'm a Christian, so I believe that I should only have sex with women. If I have sex with men, that is wrong. I can't do that." It would confuse him. He wouldn't know what I was talking about. It would be no different that if someone came up to you and said, "Yeah, I only have sex with redheads. I think it's a crime to have sex with anyone other than redheads." You'd be like, "What? What? This doesn't make sense at all." It's like it's a category that only formulated in modern times. So yeah, the Bible is not going to come right out and say this one way or the other. It just wouldn't exist that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's and the goal with this content creation, like, what made you decide to actually start getting into it? Like, what kicked it off for you?
Yeah, so my best friend finally convinced me to get TikTok. So I got TikTok, and I think it was like 2021 maybe.
Mhm.
And I was very like, I don't want to watch cringe dance videos, but I got it and I started making videos with her. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. Maybe I can make something that'll go viral. So I had used a trending sound to try to get viral, and the topic of the video was how I came out as
Uh-oh.
gay to my
Video
mom.
for Mhm.
And that and I got all sorts of Christians in my comments that were saying horrible things. In a previous video, I had mentioned breast cancer because I was talking about my dad. So some people had already seen that, and they were saying horrible things about my mother, and like that's why she got cancer, is because she
Oh.
accepted being gay, blah blah blah, all sorts of things. So that's what kicked off me responding to Christians in my comments, and I ended up getting a following for that kind of a thing. So I just kind of stuck with it, like LGBT stuff and ex-Christian stuff, because that's just what people started following me for.
Wow. So you just like stumbled into it then.
Wasn't my intention, and it's so funny when I get people, well, why do you have an account dedicated to bashing Christianity? Because Christians came to me first. They don't seem to understand that without them inserting themselves into every space, people aren't gonna be pushing back at them so much.
So was the name of your account Deconstrussy originally?
No. It was just my name, but things got a little sketchy with death threats and whatnot from the Christians, so
Oh
I
my
ended up
God.
changing the name to
Oh my
this,
God.
make
Oh
it a little
wow.
bit more difficult. Oh, I've had my address written down in my TikTok lives before.
Ugh. Jesus.
Consider.
Yeah, folks, it is a rough game out there. It's funny. I was it's funny because one of the things I like to say a lot, for those of you who don't know, I don't know how you couldn't following this account and watching this video, but Deconstrussy has a large following. And I always joke with people who say, yo, I started doing content creation and I had no plans and no idea it would get big. I never believe them. Like, come on, man. Come on. I know this game. I know the folks who get involved in this. Like, ego's got to be massive. And, but no, you genuinely just like stumbled into it. You were replying to comments and it kind of grew from that.
Yeah, so it grew from that on my first account, which we'll get into that. I had about 50,000 followers at one point, and all of a sudden I'm banned.
Ugh.
Just permanent account ban. So that was frustrating. I did have an alternate account at that point that had like half the amount of followers. Really sucked losing 50,000 followers though. So I took like 2 weeks off because I was just like depressed because I built that up. But eventually I got back into it and I started a Sunday school series.
Oh,
I don't know if
yeah.
you remember those, but little
Miss
Jimothy,
something. What was her name?
Miss Stormpus.
Yes.
Yeah. And the very first one that I did was a recreation of one that I did on my old account. But this time it went super viral and it got me like 100,000 followers really quick. And then I just kept that series going, and that was one of the biggest things that helped boost my following so much at the beginning. And from there, it just kind of kept snowballing.
All right. So, what were you going to say about your first account then? You said that we can talk about that later. What were you going to mention about your first account?
Oh, just that it's been, I guess I've said what I wanted to say about it. It got away. I got to it way quicker than I expected.
Yeah. All right. So, I got to know, what was the impetus with Kilometrov? How did this get kickstarted? The formulation, I have to know the story on this.
So, I wanted to come up with something that was just silly. And just the letter L and the letter B, they just sound silly to me. That's why I did Klombadrov, I did Florbalglip, like just all these like silly little things.
Yeah.
So yeah, one day I made a video. I decided to mirror how silly Christians sounded to non-Christians. So I was like, oh, praise Klombadrov, he's gonna save you from your gleep so that you don't go to suffer forever with the Florbalglip. And that also really took off. And so that's kind of been a whole thing on my channel. And we have a following for Klombadrov as well now. I've made a few hymns for Klombadrov. It's great.
That's
He
great.
sent his son Gordon down to save you.
Oh, Gordon, I was telling my girlfriend yesterday about this, and I said, "Oh yeah, he's got this fake religion that he created, and it's worships the god Klombadrov." And I couldn't remember the kid's name. It's like, and it's really funny because this kid has a normal name like Steve or something, but it's Gordon. Okay, that's great. Yeah, I love that shit. What in a nutshell, what is the pillars of worship of Klombadrov? What's the structure of this religion?
Yeah, so there are 4 commandments, so to say. The first one is respect bodily autonomy. The second one is to cause the least amount of harm to other people as possible. The third one is to cause the least amount of harm to the planet as possible. And the fourth one is to cherish turtles, for they are sacred.
I love that. I didn't know that, but the fourth one, I couldn't agree more. Have you ever played either Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption? You ever played either of those games?
I have not.
No, there's a religion called Cheloniism where they worship turtles, and it reminds me of that. So that's pretty good. They have some pretty good clips on that. Yeah. And what's the reaction been from folks? Like, what's some of your favorites times with the Klombadrov thing? Because I can't get enough of it. I think that's probably when I first ran across your content, when I would see videos talking about Klombadrov. I was like, oh, I get it. That's great. It's fantastic. Because, folks, it's exactly the same. Like, there's when you can create a character who can do anything and can't be wrong, it's infinite possibilities for you.
I think it's really funny how a lot of people will just be in my comments saying clawmen instead of
Clawman,
amen.
that's great. That's great.
We also do have a holy book called the Elbib. The Bible actually stole from the Elbib. They flipped Elbib backwards and made Bible. So God forbid they be original just once. But yeah, I don't know, just seeing people go at the Christians that are being annoying in my comment sections and just like saying Klombadrov will save you from your gleep, repent, turn to him, he loves you no matter what. It's just like a perfect mirroring.
It is. It is. And that's so great that I didn't know about the LBIB one. That's pretty good. So historically, with the writings of the Bible and everything, we can trace them back to more or less when these writings first originated, like when they're actually referenced, when people are talking about they first come to be for most books of the Bible. I don't think there's a lot where we're like, oh, we actually don't know within 1,000 years where this is written. That doesn't happen. So you point out something like Noah's Ark. And you'll say, okay, this story looks suspiciously similar to the Enuma Elish. And there's a lot of the same elements, and it's from the same region, except one story is hundreds of years older. This is clearly a ripoff of that original story. And they'll look you dead in the eye and say, oh, no, it's the other way around. The Noah's Ark story is actually much older. We just have no archaeological evidence for it, no reason to believe it. But this must be the actual account of what happened. And the Babylonians stole it from this imaginary group of people who we can't find anywhere from this imaginary text. And flipping that on them is genius. That was a great idea.
Yeah. I get a lot of Christians who ask, well, how come I've never heard of this before? And my response to that is, well, unfortunately, the Christians wiped out all the followers of Klombadrov. So I'm a prophet that has been enlightened by Klombadrov to rewrite the Elbib.
Exactly. And
prove me wrong.
I love that because it's the same. And it is funny when they catch, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. And it just makes you think. It just makes people think, which is all we're asking here. When I first started doing stuff like this, my intentions were not quite as, I hesitate to say noble, but as Deconstrussy's here. But I felt really betrayed and hurt by all these people because I would ask questions about how any of this could make sense. One of the big ones that I would ask is, why do we believe, or why is it that people who've never heard the gospel go to hell? I don't know if your denomination taught that. Did your Lutherans teach that?
I believe that I was taught that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that made no sense to me. And the response is that, well, if you read the book of Romans, it says that, what does it say? That those who see the world have no excuse. They know that God is real. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, I got that. I can see that. But there's nothing about looking at the trees that tells you that the God you know exists is a triune deity who spoke reality into existence, who had a kid in Bronze Age Palestine, who died on a cross. You could never figure that out. And people would say, well, if they pray hard enough, God will send them someone. And I would ask, well, you're to like the entire Western Hemisphere, like North and South America. Nobody heard about Jesus until 1,500 years after he died. You're telling me 0 people in 1.5 millennia actually sought out the one true God? How was that possible? And then you get into the crazy stuff. Well, maybe some Christian missionaries did make it there, and we just don't know about it. So, okay, we are. This is a joke now. Like this, yeah, it is. It's hilarious.
That was another thing that always bugged me, even like as a kid, was, oh, I just happen to be so lucky to be born into the one correct denomination of the one correct religion. Like, you're telling me that all these other people that believe that they're in the correct religion are just wrong, and I just happen to be in the right one?
Yeah.
That was how.
I often said that if the God of the Bible and Christianity is real, he really loves white people. My God, does he love white people, because he has saved more of them than anybody else for thousands of years now. What's up with that? Well, what's going on? Like, why does he seem to be so in love with this one continent? I don't understand.
Well, I think Mormonism makes it clear that he loves white people.
That's true. They make it very clear. White and delightsome, is that what they call it? I think in Mormonism.
I'm not sure. I haven't go super deep into it, but
I've interviewed a few Mormons on the show, and I knew that the Mormon Church didn't allow Black people to be, like, what are they, priests or pastors? I don't know what they call them in Mormonism. until the 70s, or even members of the church, I don't think, until the 70s. And I was like, oh, it's kind of hard to cover up the racism there and everything. But they also had this doctrine. It was for the Native Americans that they tried to convert. And the doctrine was that the closer these people became to God, the lighter their skin got. Like, it was an actual doctrine. Oh, you heard of that too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah, very, very, very weird stuff. And I wrote down, the elect. When you talked about how you just happen to be born in the correct religion, the fact that the country you're born in is the number one indicator what religion you're going to have, way over anything else, kind of gives the game away on that. But were you guys Calvinists? Were you the Lutherans Calvinists? No? Or we weren't either. But when I went to college, I met a lot of Calvinists. And I gotta say, it makes sense. Calvinism made more sense to me than a lot of the other ones. And for those of you wondering what I mean by Calvinism is, several doctrines, but the primary one that people think of when talking about Calvinism is the one of predestination. That God has the elect. God has chosen before time existed who is actually going to be saved and who's going to end up in heaven and who's not. So there is no free will when it comes to salvation that is chosen for you. And I remember thinking, actually, this kind of tracks, right? Like, God is either sovereign in all things or he's not. And I'm going to bank that he actually is. But it was funny to me that whenever people would talk about the elect, like the Calvinists, the elect, it's weird that whenever you discuss the elect, you always seem to be included. That seems very convenient for you, right? Like, you have no choice in this manner. God chose it, but it's you. That I always thought that was kind of odd.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always arguing against free will because if God knows everything, including what's going to happen in the future, it is predestined. There's no way around that.
Yeah. I kind of agree too. Now that you're no longer a Christian, because I didn't believe in free will, like in the late stages. I think early on as a kid and a younger man, I believed in free will. But the more I studied, like, if we really believe, just like you said, that God existed, even if God just created the universe and took his hands off and let everything go, he didn't have to create that universe. He could have created something else. So there's no way you have free will. And I said, okay, free will doesn't exist. And then I became an atheist. I still don't believe free will exists. But what about you? What do you think? Same?
Because, I mean, true free will can't exist when everything is influencing everything. And, like, because, like, I was born where I was born against my will, and my choices are going to be based on where I was born. My choices are going to be based on what mental health I have. Like, there's certain things that are just completely out of your control. And I mean, I can't free will myself to be president tomorrow. Like, I believe that we can make choices. We have the freedom to make choices, but with free will, I like to differentiate that from freedom of choice.
Got a comment here from Conservatory of the Ozarks. Oh, this religion sounds like the best religion I've ever heard of. How do I join? How does one go about joining? What is it called? What is the name of the actual religion?
So we just call it Klombadrovism, and the followers are called Klomps. But yeah, if you want to join the Klompgregation, all you have to do is just accept the Holy Zolpus into your heart. Just praise Klombadrov, and you'll be good to go.
The Klompgregation, I love that. You can tell that he's doing like a farce thing, because if you should just ask for money. That's the game, right? When you made a cult, you have to start asking for donations and money to the church, because you have to. Well, I don't know if it's called church or not, but the body, the what?
The clerch.
I should have known. The clerch. That's fantastic. Yeah, we got to find some way to fund these opportunities here. But this is done as satire. Supposedly, it's a real religion. Don't mean to insult anybody. This is done as satire and everything, and just to get people to think and all that. When I started doing content, it was like in the Facebook days. I would argue with people online, like, because I just wanted to. One, I was hurt. I actually was. I was very angry, and boy, I was a dick on all these posts. I was an asshole. I held nothing back, but I did seek to. I referred to myself as an anti-missionary. I wanted to tell people, listen, you don't have to do this. This is ridiculous. This is fanciful. These are historical documents, but you don't got to focus your life on it. I wanted to pull people out of it. And over the years, I've kind of tilted away from that, because one, it's kind of hopeless in a lot of ways. Although it is satisfying, if that's the right word I want to use here, that over the years, I have had people reach out and contact me and say, hey, TJ, a lot of stuff you said makes sense to me, and I have drifted away, and I don't believe anymore. And they get it's kind of sad because a lot of them can't tell their families and friends. A lot of them are married to people who are still true believers, and they can't tell them. A lot of people like work in churches, and that's all they've ever done is their entire life, and they don't know what to do. It's kind of sad, but I do it now so people who are deconstructing or are on the edge or are uncertain, they know they're not alone. That's what I do it for now, just so they know that they aren't the only ones out there.
Yeah, I feel like I was definitely a lot more sassy and angry when I first started making like the responses, because they were just coming at me with the most vile things. It's always the ones with the little cross emoji in their bio or their name that say just the most out of pocket things. And besides, the community guidelines, which definitely played a factor in me toning it back a bit, I just kind of got to a point that although the anger is warranted, because it is frustrating as hell to see people dedicating their lives to something that just isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like it does make a lot more headway when you're coming at it in more of a neutral kind of attitude, to where you're not like trying to belittle them. You're more so just trying to make sure they see what you see and why you see what you see. Mostly, like I said earlier, I want people to just hear me out, hear the atheist ex-Christian perspective. Obviously, they're going to hit you with the, well, if you stopped believing, you were never truly a believer.
Yeah.
But there are definitely those people that still identify as Christians that hear my stuff, and they've kind of been on the fence about it. They like are clinging onto the hope that there is something after life. Maybe it's because a loved one passed away. Maybe it's they're just in a low place in life and they just want that hope that there's going to be some kind of promise after life. But those are the people that will hear what I am saying, and they're going to be like, yeah, this makes sense. I get why he's saying this. And then they might take the step that they need to get out of it.
Yeah, that's a rough one. That's where I have a hard time, honestly, understanding it, that there's a difference between wanting to believe something is true and believing something is true. And I guess that's the same thing to a lot of people, because I've had this conversation with people before. It's like, no, well, I have to believe this. Otherwise, I will never see my daughter again, or I will, I don't know how I'm going to make it through the day. So, okay, I got that. Like, I got that this would give you a lot of peace and a lot of comfort, but do you believe it? Because it sounds like you want to believe it. And those are two distinct things, at least to me.
Yeah, it's always just strange that they can't seem to differentiate the two. And I think they can, but like in their mind, they're just kind of blocking that logic part off. But no, I get people all the time. It's just like, well, I want to believe that my loved ones are waiting for me. Like, I want to believe that too.
Yeah.
But I don't, because I have nothing leading me to think that. There's just no evidence that I'm ever going to see the loved ones that have passed away again. And like, I'd rather just come to terms with it than delude myself,
Do you think it's to me, it sounds like a Pascal's wager type of thing. And for those of you wondering, I forget, like people don't know these phrases sometimes, wonder what we mean by that. Is Pascal's wager is it's better to believe that God exists and be right than not believe that God exists and be wrong, is essentially what it is. Because, if you're wrong about God not being real, then you end up in hell. Or if you're wrong about God being real, you're in heaven. Or right about God being real, you're in heaven. And that was always a weird one. And I know you have the same thoughts on this, because like you think you're going to trick God like this. You think you're going to fool him into thinking, oh, I actually did believe. No, he can read your mind. It seems that you're thinking you have a lower opinion of God if you believe that's going to work. But they have to. That's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah, I view that as just in case belief.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actual belief. It's just like an insurance policy. Like, well, I'll go ahead and believe in God just in case he's real. That way I can go to heaven. Because if I don't believe and I'm wrong, then I end up in hell. That would be bad. Like, it's not how it works. That's not how genuine belief works.
Yes, it's not even how belief works. That's the funny part. And this is also something that people have a hard time accepting. When I deconstructed, I was telling a girl I was dating at the time, and she was a believer. And she was telling me, well, why can't you just believe? And I says, well, I don't really have a choice. She says, well, yeah, you do. And I tried saying, the example I used was, okay, if we were standing in front of a stop sign and you asked me what color the stop sign was, I would say it's red. And you said it's green. You couldn't ask me, well, can't you just believe it's green? I can't. I mean, I'm looking right at it. It's red. I can't trick myself into thinking it's green. I could say it, but I'm not going to believe it. And she's like, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand. So what are you talking about? I don't get it.
Make sense? Like, I don't get how that doesn't click in their heads. There's two things that made me want to bring up as well.
Mhm.
I usually say that belief is kind of like a preference. Like, I don't believe in God because I just am not convinced. I can't control that. In the same way, I do like pizza because it tastes good. I don't choose to like pizza. It's just something that my body likes. It tastes good to me. Some other people might not like pizza, and that's not them choosing to not like pizza. That's just something that they simply cannot like. And the other thing that I wanted to say was that they seem to what's the word? Conflate belief and worship, because they're always saying, well, if God just showed himself to you, then you would be forced to worship and love him. Like, no, I'd be forced to like be convinced of him, sure, but that's never been a choice in the first place. By him not revealing himself to me, I'm being forced to not worship him, because I can't worship something that I don't know to be there. You can't interact with things that you don't know to exist. You can't walk a dog that I don't have.
That, even as a Christian, that was always the least convincing argument anyone ever gave me. And it kind of comes from the Bible that Jesus says something about I can't remember now, but he's talking about like if the prophets of like Moses and stuff showed up, you wouldn't believe them or something like that because you don't believe me. And I remember reading that thinking, well, man, I would love to see that. I got to tell you, I think that would do a lot to strengthen my faith if I saw Jesus and Moses rise from the dead and come talk to me. And people, you say this is like, well, hey, if God showed up, wouldn't that, if God's mission really is to save as much of humanity as he can, do you think he's putting forth his best effort? It doesn't seem that way to me. It seems like him just vanishing. There's no way, if God showed up and showed people that he was God, convinced them any way that he could, did magic tricks and all that, there's no chance the number of believers would go down, right? There's no chance. I mean, I don't think it would stay the same. I think it would skyrocket. But it doesn't fix the problem, because what you said, that belief is not the same thing as worship and acceptance. And the example I use on this all the time is that Satan saw God when he went to work every morning. Like, Satan worked right alongside God with heaven, and he still rebelled against them. He still didn't fall and worship him. So if Satan can get that evidence and still fall, why can't we? Why aren't we given that option?
Yeah, that's another thing. Is it seems like Christians, from what they're telling me, believe that the devil does more to get you on his side than God does.
Yes.
Because apparently the
Yes.
devil is whispering in my ear, deceiving me and making me an atheist. Mind you, being an atheist means I also don't believe in the devil.
Yeah.
That never clicks with them. Another funny thing, though, is that they love to bring up the story of Doubtful Thomas.
Yeah.
As if that helps their case, because in the end, Jesus showed up for him. He got what he needed to be convinced. So why can't I?
The showing actual evidence that you can touch with your hands and evaluate, that is reserved for Jesus' co-workers. No one else gets that. Only people who hung out with Jesus for a few years get that. It's not in the benefits package. And the devil, that's a good part you mentioned there, because what I always like to ask is, how do you know that this whole Christianity thing is not just the devil? How do you know? Like, how do you know that Satan didn't influence all the writers of the 66 books of the New Testament? How do you know when you're praying, you're not actually praying to Satan? The answer is you don't. The answer is you have no idea. And you don't because you can say, well, I'm close with God. I know. No, it's just the devil. That's the devil the entire time. And they would say, well, no, I would know. It feels wrong. Satan is a nigh omnipotent being, older than time itself, probably. You're telling me he couldn't trick you? You're telling me he couldn't trick you, a 34-year-old car salesman from Arizona? You're telling me that's beyond his capability? How could you possibly know? The answer is you don't. You're just making this up. But I don't know. It only takes a little bit of thought before this all starts to collapse. So it's kind of weird that doesn't happen more.
Yeah. Or maybe they're praying to Clomidrov and they don't know it.
Or maybe that. Who knows? Yeah, it's some kind of wild shit. All right. So the question I was going to ask is, what are your current thoughts on faith and religious spirituality? I think we kind of already did that, but we'll try to go in a little bit more here. There seems to have been a rise in like we said, the intensity of the Christian right, specifically when it comes to politics and everything. What do you see in the future here? Do you think this is gonna increase more, or do you think it's a flash in the pan? What are your thoughts?
I like to once again have faith in humanity.
Yep.
That we will recover from this far right, let's start throwing out Jesus and worshiping Trump instead kind of bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that we throw that out very soon. But I'm also kind of not super hopeful that it's going to be as soon as we would like. I feel like we are probably going to regress a bit into a, not to be super nihilistic, but a bit of a Christian dark age. Not like long term, but probably short term. Like the next decade's going to be kind of rough to recover from. But I'm hoping that sometime after that, we'll kind of start heading more to the left and progressive values coming back again. It's just a weird time right now. It's shocking how quickly and how aggressively things got so far right in this country. And I mean, like I said before, the people with the cross emojis in their names, the people that say God first in their bio and all that crap, and then they're just out there harassing LGBT minors on social media. They're out there just protesting basic human rights. It's very stressful. It's very concerning. Like I just don't want to leave my house right now. Not because I like genuinely feel like super unsafe, but you just never know. Really, you never know what kind of lunatic you're going to come across.
It is shocking and it is sad. It is also fairly consistent with Christianity historically. That's
put all your faith in someone.
Yeah, it's whenever people, I mean, I get why we do it. I do it too, where especially when it comes to the teachings of Jesus, that there are a lot of teachings of Jesus I think are garbage and actually quite bad, but there are plenty that you can point to. Primarily his views on rich people. Jesus never had one good word to say about rich people his entire ministry. I do got to give Jesus credit on that there's nothing he enjoyed more than shitting on rich people. But the people who have the crosses in their bios and everything worship the rich. They worship mammon over God 7 days a week. They think that being poor is some sort of moral failing, stuff that Jesus would have never said or never pointed out and everything. I do share your bleak prediction on the short-term future that the upswell of rage and discrimination and hatred and bigotry from the Christian right is going to get worse before it gets better. I don't see a reason to think otherwise. I do think it will get better. I do. But I have a hard time seeing why this would just stop all of a sudden, like tomorrow morning. That's not going to happen. And I forgot to mention that this is kind of consistent throughout history, because I don't like when people say, I mean, we don't say this, but when people say that, well, these folks who are the bigots and the Trump supporters, they're not real Christians. Yes, the fuck they are. What are you talking about? I hate that so much, because listen, you're telling me Klansmen or conquistadors, name your Pope who ordered pogroms and crusades, or Spanish inquisitors. You're telling me those folks weren't real Christians? Folks who took Christianity more seriously than you probably take anything in your life? Yes, they were. At that point, there's no sense in calling anybody a Christian. Like, Christian isn't synonymous with good person or kind person. Christians have enjoyed nothing more for thousands of years than killing other people, a lot of times other Christians, for not believing the right thing. So don't tell me that because this guy votes for Republicans, he can't be a real Christian. That's nonsense. But it's consistent with what we've seen. I'm just surprised this happened, because we were on such a great trajectory with all this. We were going, things weren't great, but they were going better. I would have, if you went back and talked to me in 2010 and told me the way things are now, I wouldn't believe you. I said, there's no chance this isn't happening. But I do get some hope, because the pendulum does swing. And in 2008, the state of Indiana went blue, right? I mean, that's kind of wild to think about. That's not that long ago. So, it could change, but I'm with you. I think it'll be a while.
Yeah, I mean, the same people that they want to disregard as not real Christians would mess them up if they heard you call them not real Christians. It's always funny how it's conveniently the largest religion in the world when they want it to be, but then
Oh,
half of them are just not real Christians when it's convenient.
that is great. I remember. I love that. That's a good one. I got to remember that for the future because yeah, it is. It is one of the more annoying things that when you point something out for Christians, like, well, they're not a real Christian. Essentially, only I am a real Christian. I am the only true Christian out there, and they kind of give the game away when they call God a personal God. You're right. You're right. It's literally whatever you want it to be. So, all right. Just for fun, I like to ask this on interviews. What's your favorite bit of trivia that you know? I'll go first on this, and I I talk about the continent of Australia. It has nothing to do with religion at all, but the continent of Australia and where the name came from. And Australia means southern in Latin, I believe. Like you ever see like the Aurora Borealis and the Aurora Australis? That's the southern lights in
Oh.
Australia. And Australia was first. I think it was first. It was first explored from Europeans in the 1500s. Is when they first ran across the west coast of Australia, and Europeans didn't know the full circumference of Australia. I don't think until Captain Cook in the like early 1700s, mid 1700s, or something like that. But the name actually comes from these old maps. You can look at old maps in Europe from the 1300s, the 1200s, and they'll look like this. Now, this Antarctica was discovered before. I mean, Australia was discovered before Antarctica, so they didn't know about Antarctica until like the 18. Nobody knew about Antarctica until the 1800s. But in these maps from the 12th, 13th, 14th century, you can see this image of what looks like someone trying to draw Antarctica. And I can't zoom in on it, but on all these maps, it says Terra Australis Incognito. And they labeled it that, which means unknown southern land in Latin. And it was a proposed theoretical landmass on the southern part of the globe. And the reason that they proposed this theoretical landmass is quite intricate. They made it up. They made it up because they thought they saw the globe and said, well, look at all this land in the northern hemisphere. There must be an equal amount of land in the southern hemisphere. There's no reason to think that, but that's what they believe. So when people from Europe started discovering or sailing further and further south, they were looking for this mythical continent of Australia. And they found the Australia that we know today. And they said, this can't be right. This is not quite large enough to be the legendary Australia. And so they kept going further and further south. And Captain Cook ended up going to the ice shelves around Antarctica, but he couldn't penetrate the ice. And he said, all right, I see a bunch of ice, but I don't see land. So I guess that big landmass up there is actually Australia. And it wasn't until like 150 years later they discovered Antarctica, which they would have named Australia instead. But yeah, that's how Australia got its name. That's my bit of trivia.
My goodness. Wow.
That's
my
a cool
favorite
story,
trivia
right?
now. I don't know if I can top that. I know you mentioned in the email that you like to end on some trivia. Shoot, I forgot to even think of any.
Oh, that's all right. If you don't, I don't want to put you on the spot here. That's fine. No, it's kind of people. It's all right. I should probably check because this has happened before. Because I give people this long list of questions, and then at the very end, it's like about your personal life, about your background and stuff, like pretty intensive shit. And then like, oh yeah, trivia too, and people do forget it. So maybe I should start like back checking on that because I understand.
I mean, we can do a little fun fact about myself.
Let's go.
I'm a huge Pokemon addict, so I have thousands of Pokemon plushes and every Pokemon game.
Oh, I don't know anything about Pokemon. Like I don't at all. So yeah, that is. I probably know like your standard normie does. I know Pikachu, like everybody.
Right,
I know Pikachu.
Charizard.
Yeah, Charizard, Squirtle, and Mewtwo. Yeah, that might be it. But yeah, yes, they and I know they have the balls like the Pokeballs, and they have gyms. I know a lot more about Pokemon than I thought. I know they have gyms where you train them and they evolve. And I don't get what the fighting's about though. Like, what are they fighting for exactly? Like the story.
Just to get stronger.
Okay,
just to get stronger and level up, evolve, all that.
Is it like a professional sport or something?
It's just something that people do in the Pokemon world. They just bond with Pokemon and they go out and catch them. And it's not really like a sport. It's just a.
Oh, it's just a thing, folks. Yeah, I got it. And I think you're overestimating the staying power of the movement in the face of economic strife. Well, what I worry about actually goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. The right wing drift of society is that a lot of folks are going to stay with this. They're like this. Like people don't understand how this religious indoctrination gets its hooks into you, and it gets really troubling. I don't know if you've seen this with folks who are adults and they convert to really stringent, not even just evangelical Christianity, but like Orthodox religion. It's really like they go as high as they can on the liturgical ladder. That is frightening. That is really weird. Like you're going into like weird middle-aged shit. And I think once you cross that threshold, it's really hard to come back, at least in my experience from folks.
I find it hard to believe that the people that have gotten the confidence from this administration to be so loud and hateful are just going to, even if we get back into a Democratic Party being in office or whatever, I find it hard to believe that they're just going to shut up.
Yeah.
I think that it's definitely going to be an ongoing thing to make them afraid to be bigots again.
Yep. A lot of that, because that's something I mentioned too, that it is shocking. Like the racism and the homophobia and the sexism that exists publicly today, a lot of it would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Like I honestly, like the stuff you see on red pill content or the stuff you see on, conservative content, like just saying, oh yeah, maybe the Nazis weren't so, you couldn't say that stuff, back in 2015, but now people say it casually. It is not a good sign. I think best case scenario, there's going to be some long after effects from this.
Yeah, I recently found out that my mother did in fact vote for Trump. And I said to her, how could you vote for someone that absent moral? I guess the term I'm going to use for that. And I brought up the E. Jean Carroll case, and she acted like she'd never even heard of that. I don't know how, if you watch any amount of news, that you don't hear about that, but I was just very disappointed that that's the family that I came from.
It is sad. It is some depressing shit. So it's not gonna. Yeah, like I said, like I agree. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. And who is your favorite Pokemon?
So my favorite is a Pokemon called Diancie. It's like a really gemstone-y Pokemon. I've always loved gemstones, so that was like a no-brainer to be my favorite.
Okay, all right. I'll go with Pikachu. He seems cute. I like him. All right. So, Deconstrussy, thank you so much for joining. I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time. I love your content. I've been a long-time follower. Where can folks find you if they're trying to look for you?
Yeah, so I pretty much only post on TikTok for now, the Deconstrussy. Any other platforms are also going to be the Deconstrussy, except for YouTube, which, again, I don't post anywhere else yet, but YouTube is the Deconstrussy official.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate it, folks. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Good game.